"Are you deaf, old man?" I said. "This area is restricted. Now move along before I have you escorted out of the building entirely." The voice was sharp, laced with the kind of impatient arrogance that only comes from youth and a freshly pressed uniform. Lieutenant Gavin Kent stood with his hands on his hips, his polished boots gleaming under the sterile fluorescent lights of the corridor. He was addressing the janitor, an old man hunched over a floor buffer that hummed a low, monotonous tune. The man, who couldn't have been younger than 80, wore faded gray coveralls and had hands that looked like they were carved from old wood, gnarled and stained from a lifetime of work. He didn't seem to have heard. The buffer continued its slow, circular dance on the linoleum. Kent's jaw tightened. He took a step closer, his voice rising in volume, cutting through the machine's hum. "Hey, I'm talking to you. This is the entrance to the Global Communications Center. You can't just be loitering here. What's your name?" The old man finally shut off the machine. The sudden silence in the hallway felt heavy, drawing the attention of a few passing analysts who slowed their pace, curious. He turned his head slowly, and for the first time, Kent saw his eyes. They were pale blue, remarkably clear, and held a stillness that was unnerving. They didn't look confused or doddering. They looked ancient, like twin pools of water that had seen the rise and fall of mountains. "Name's Samuel," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Just finishing my section. Be out of your way in a moment." "Your section ends at the red line, old-timer," Kent snapped, pointing to a painted demarcation on the floor 10 feet back. "This is a level 4 secure zone. How did you even get this far? Did you lose your way?" The condescension dripped from every word. He saw a frail, elderly janitor who was probably going senile, a potential security risk born of incompetence. He saw a problem to be managed, a box to be ticked on his daily report. Samuel's gaze drifted from Kent to the thick, soundproofed glass wall of the conference room beside them. Inside, a dozen high-ranking officials, including the facility's commander, were gathered around a large table, their faces tight with concentration. A massive screen on the wall showed a video feed of several foreign dignitaries. It was clearly a meeting of immense importance. "They moved the line," Samuel said, his voice calm and even. He turned his steady gaze back to the lieutenant. "Happened this morning. Memo came down from facilities management. My supervisor initialed the work order." Kent scoffed. "A memo? I'm the floor security officer for this wing. I would know if the restricted perimeter was changed. Now, I'm not going to ask you again. Take your machine and go." To punctuate his command, Kent reached out and grabbed Samuel's arm. It was a mistake. The moment his fingers closed around the thin bicep, he felt something that didn't belong. Under the loose fabric of the coveralls, the old man's arm was not the frail, withered limb he expected. It was ropey and hard as iron cable. The surprise made him hesitate for a fraction of a second. In that second, Samuel didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He simply stood there, his placid expression unchanging, letting the young officer hold his arm. The message was clear, delivered without a single word. "You are not a threat to me." The quiet dignity of it was more infuriating to Kent than any outright defiance would have been. He felt his face flush with anger and embarrassment as the passing analysts now openly stared. His authority was being challenged, not by a soldier, but by a janitor. "That's it," Kent seethed, tightening his grip. "You're coming with me. We'll see what your supervisor has to say about this." But Samuel's attention was no longer on him. His gaze was fixed on the silent drama unfolding inside the glass room. The American commander was leaning forward, his brow furrowed. The translators in the corner were speaking frantically into their headsets, gesturing with their hands. On the screen, one of the foreign officials, a man with a severe face and a tribal headdress, was speaking, his words obviously causing agitation. A young analyst, Specialist Eva Rosales, hurried past, carrying a tablet. She was a gifted linguist, recently assigned to the GCC. She, too, glanced into the room, her expression clouding with concern. The official was speaking a notoriously difficult dialect of Farsi, one spoken only in a remote, mountainous region bordering Afghanistan. Even their best interpreters were struggling. They were getting the gist, but the nuance, the critical life-or-death nuance, was being lost. She could hear the garbled, uncertain translation coming from a speaker just outside the door. Then she heard another voice, low and right beside her. He's not threatening to close the pass. He's warning them. He's saying the pass is already compromised by a third party. He calls them the Shadow Walkers. Eva froze. She turned to see the old janitor, Samuel, standing perfectly still, his eyes locked on the man on the screen. He hadn't been speaking to her, or to the lieutenant who still had a hand on his arm. He had been speaking to himself, a soft, guttural murmur. The Farsi was perfect. Not just the words, but the accent, the rhythm, the cadence. It was the Farsi of a native speaker. Before she could process this, the conversation in the room shifted. A different official, this one from a West African nation, began to speak rapidly in a dialect of Hausa, his tone sharp and accusatory. The translators scrambled to switch gears. Again, the quiet voice beside her. They misunderstand. He is not accusing them of theft. He is asking for the return of a guiding star, their name for a stolen navigation device. He fears it will be used to bring fire from the sky upon his people. Eva's mind reeled. Hausa, and not the standard dialect taught at the Defense Language Institute. This was a rural variant, thick with idioms she had only ever read about in textbooks. She looked from the janitor to the lieutenant, who seemed oblivious, too wrapped up in his own petty power struggle. The main screen switched again. A stern-faced Russian general was now speaking, his words clipped and cold. The English translation followed a half-second later, tinny and official. He says the satellite deployment is non-negotiable, the translator announced. Nyet, Samuel whispered, his voice barely audible. That's not what he said. He said the eye in the sky is not blind. He's quoting an old KGB proverb. It means they know we are watching, and they are watching us back. It's a veiled counter-threat, not a statement of policy. Eva's blood ran cold. Farsi, Hausa, Russian. In less than a minute, this old man in a janitor's uniform had not only fluently translated 3 different languages, but had also provided crucial cultural and contextual intelligence that their highly paid experts had missed. Each correction fundamentally changed the meaning of the negotiation. One was a warning mistaken for a threat. Another was a plea mistaken for an accusation. The last was a counter-threat mistaken for a stonewall. These weren't small errors. They were the kinds of misinterpretations that started wars. Let go of him, Eva said, her voice sharp and sudden. Lieutenant Kent turned to her, his face a mask of fury. Stay out of this, specialist. This is a security matter. No, Eva insisted, stepping forward. This is a national security matter. Let him go. Now, she looked at Samuel, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Sir, she said, her voice filled with a respect that stunned Kent into silence. Who are you? Before Samuel could answer, the door to the conference room swung open. Commander Wallace, a man whose presence usually radiated calm authority, looked frazzled. What is going on out here? And somebody get me a better translation on the Russian. I don't trust what I'm hearing. Something's not right. Kent immediately straightened up, his hand dropping from Samuel's arm as if it were red hot. Sir, my apologies for the disturbance. I was just removing this civilian. He breached the secure perimeter and was refusing to cooperate. Commander Wallace's eyes, tired and strained, fell upon the janitor. He opened his mouth to dismiss him, to tell Kent to handle it, but then he stopped. He looked closer, his gaze narrowing. He scanned the old man's face, the stoic posture, the impossibly clear eyes. A flicker of something, disbelief, then dawning recognition, crossed his features. He took a half-step forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Sam, he asked, the name tentative, freighted with decades of history. Sam Croft? My God, is that really you? Lieutenant Kent stared, utterly baffled. The commander knew the janitor. Samuel gave a small, slow nod. It's been a long time, Bill, he said, his voice retaining its quiet composure. The name Bill hung in the air. No one called Commander Wallace Bill. The use of it, so casual and familiar, was more shocking than a gunshot. The commander seemed to age 10 years and get 10 years younger all at once. He took another step forward, ignoring everyone else in the hallway. They told me you were gone, Wallace breathed. That you just vanished after Berlin. We all thought you were dead. The word Berlin was a key turning a lock in Samuel's mind. The smell of the industrial floor cleaner suddenly mingled with another, phantom scent, the damp, subterranean smell of wet concrete and coal dust. The hum of the buffer faded, replaced by the distant, rhythmic drip of water in a cold, dark place. He was 25 again. His name wasn't Samuel Croft. He had no name. He was a ghost. He was sitting across a wooden table from a terrified man in a dimly lit cellar somewhere in East Germany. The man was a Stasi officer who held the launch sequence for a network of sleeper cells hidden in the West. Outside, the world was holding its breath, teetering on the brink of nuclear war. His mission was to get that sequence. He had 2 hours. He'd started in German, the man's native tongue. Nothing. The officer was disciplined, trained to resist. He'd switched to Russian, the language of the man's superiors, using the formal, threatening tone of a KGB interrogator. The man paled, but his lips remained sealed. Then, Samuel had noticed the man's hands. A small, faded tattoo on his wrist, a symbol from a specific Polish village, a village that had been liberated by the Soviets when he was a boy. A gamble. Samuel leaned forward and began speaking in a soft, almost forgotten Polish dialect. He didn't ask about the cells. He asked about the taste of his mother's pierogi. He spoke of the birch forests near the man's home village. He used phrases and lullabies a Polish boy would have heard from his grandmother. The officer's iron facade didn't just crack, it shattered. Tears streamed down his face. He began to talk. He gave Samuel everything. Not because of threats, but because a ghost in a dark room had, for a moment, given him back his home. The memory dissolved as Commander Wallace put a hand on his shoulder, the touch grounding him back in the brightly lit corridor. Sam, we're in trouble in there. We're flying blind. The translations are a mess. We think we're on the verge of a multi-front crisis, but we can't be sure of the intel. Without a word, Samuel looked past the commander, his eyes focusing again on the tense figures in the conference room. He straightened his back, and for a moment, the 80-year-old janitor seemed to shed his age like a heavy coat. The stoop in his shoulders lessened. The quiet dignity was replaced by a palpable aura of command, an intensity that made the air around him feel thin. "Put me on a headset," Samuel said. The voice was the same, but the tone was different. It was the voice of a man who was used to giving orders and having them followed without question. Lieutenant Kent looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. "Sir, you can't be serious. He's a janitor. This is a violation of every security protocol we have." Commander Wallace turned a glare on Kent so cold it seemed to drop the temperature in the hallway. "Lieutenant, you are speaking about a man who wrote half the protocols you're citing. He field-tested them in places you only read about in redacted files. Now shut your mouth and get this man a headset." He turned to Eva Rosales, who was standing by, her tablet clutched in her hands. "Specialist, you will escort Mr. Croft. Give him anything he needs. Your job is now to assist him." Eva nodded, her eyes shining with reverence. She led Samuel into a small, adjoining communications booth with a direct audio link to the main room. Kent was left standing in the hallway, his face ashen, the stunned faces of the other personnel burning into him. He had just tried to arrest a living legend. Inside the booth, Samuel slipped on the headset as if he were putting on an old, familiar hat. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening. The cacophony of voices from the meeting filled his ears: Farsi, Hausa, Russian, Mandarin, and the frantic, flawed English translations layered over them. For anyone else, it would have been an incomprehensible wall of sound. For Samuel, it was a symphony. He could hear every instrument, every note, every subtle shift in tone and meaning. He pressed the button on his console. His voice, calm and clear, patched directly into the headsets of Commander Wallace and the other American officials in the room. "Commander, this is Croft. Take me off speaker. Patch me through to your earpiece only. The man from Tehran is not the threat. He's being coerced. Listen to his cadence. The slight hesitation on every third and seventh word. It's a duress code used by their old guard intelligence officers. He's signaling that his superiors are in the room with him, off camera. He is their puppet. The real message is in the words he is not saying." In the main room, Wallace's eyes widened. He signaled his team, who immediately began a new line of analysis, searching for secondary signals from the Iranian location. Samuel continued, his voice never wavering. "The Nigerian representative is not talking about a navigational device. His phrase, guiding star, is a local euphemism for his daughter, who has been kidnapped. The fire from the sky, is his fear that the kidnappers, a regional terrorist group, will sell her to foreign hostiles. He's not making an accusation. He is begging for covert assistance without saying it outright. A wave of understanding washed over the faces of the American delegation. The entire context of the situation had just been flipped on its head. Finally, the Russian general, Samuel said, a hint of steel entering his tone. He's not quoting a proverb. He's citing the operational name of their new anti-satellite weapon system, Nezlpi Glaz, the unblinking eye. He just told you, in the clear, that it is fully operational. It's not a threat, it's an announcement. For the next hour, Samuel Croft, the 80-year-old janitor, sat in a small booth and single-handedly dismantled 3 international crises. He was a human Rosetta Stone, a master of the lost art of listening. He didn't just translate words. He translated intent, culture, history, and fear. He guided Commander Wallace on how to respond to each leader, providing the exact phrasing in their own tongues that would de-escalate, reassure, and project strength all at once. He taught them, in real time, how to speak the language of peace, a language far more complex than any single dialect. When it was over, the foreign dignitaries were satisfied, new alliances were being tentatively formed, and 3 potential conflicts had been averted. The screen went dark. In the main conference room, the American officials sat in stunned, reverent silence. Commander Wallace got up and walked straight to the small booth. He opened the door. Samuel was taking off the headset, his shoulders slightly stooped again, the aura of command receding, leaving the quiet old man in its place. He looked tired, but his eyes were still clear. "Thank you, Sam," Wallace said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just saved us. After all these years, you're still saving us." "Just happened to be in the right place," Samuel said with a small shrug. "Someone had to mop up the mess." They walked back out into the hallway. The crowd of analysts was still there, but now they looked at him with unadulterated awe. Standing stiffly to one side was Lieutenant Kent. His face was pale, his arrogance completely stripped away, leaving only a raw, youthful shame. He looked at Samuel, and for the first time, he didn't see a janitor. He saw a giant. He took a hesitant step forward and executed the sharpest salute of his life. "Mr. Croft," he said, his voice cracking. "Sir, I have no words. My conduct was inexcusable. I apologize." Samuel looked at the young man, his expression softening. He saw not an arrogant officer, but a boy who had been taught to see the world only through the narrow lens of rank and uniform. He reached out and gently lowered Kent's saluting hand. "The uniform doesn't make the man, son," Samuel said, his voice kind. "It's what you do when you're wearing it that matters, and what you do when you're not. Respect isn't in the rank on your collar. It's in how you treat the people you think don't matter." He gave the lieutenant's shoulder a gentle pat. "You have a long career ahead of you. Learn to see the person, not the station. It'll make you a better officer, and a better man." Lieutenant Kent could only nod, his throat too tight to speak. In that moment of quiet grace, he learned more about leadership than 4 years at a military academy had ever taught him. Commander Wallace cleared his throat. "Sam, I'm officially reactivating your security clearance, effective immediately. We need you, not in the field. Here, as an advisor. Name your price." Samuel shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. He gestured toward his buffer machine, parked down the hall. "I have a job, Bill. I like the quiet. It gives me time to think." He started walking back toward his cart. "But," he added, pausing to look back, "if you ever need someone to help translate the silence between the words, you know where to find me. I'll be on this floor until 5-inch. As he walked away, the quiet hum of the floor buffer starting up again, the entire corridor of highly trained intelligence personnel stood in silent, humbled respect. They had spent their careers searching for hidden threats and secret weapons, never realizing that the most powerful intelligence asset they had was the quiet old man who kept their floors clean. They learned that day that heroes don't always wear uniforms or carry guns. Sometimes, they carry a mop and bucket and walk among us, completely unseen, their greatness hidden in plain sight. It's a powerful reminder to us all. Look past the surface, beyond the job title or the age of the person in front of you. True strength, wisdom, and honor can be found in the most unexpected places, and the quietest people often have the most important things to say.